Hi everyone and welcome back to this month's Sunday Sew Club. It feels like so long since I've sat down and done one of these, as now we do them monthly, whereas in the beginning I was posting them weekly. But this month we are going to be making this kaftan dress, which you can wear two ways. You can either sew it at the front first and go around the back, or you can do it the opposite way round, and it gives really nice effects both ways. So this is the one that I've made that you're going to be seeing getting made in the video, and I chose to do mine a bit of a shorter length. So it took me around an hour and a half to 2 hours from start to finish. That's including cutting out the material and sewing through the whole thing. And then I used around 2 meters of fabric to create this. So for mine, I used 80 centimeters wide by 100 centimeters in length, but you can totally change that. So if you want it to be long to the ankles or below the knees, you can just change that length. Mine is 80 centimeters wide and I'm a size small. So if you would like to increase it or have more of an oversized fit, you can just go up in 10 to 20 centimeter increments. All this information will be linked in a PDF guide, which will explain all of how to cut the fabric and the measurements and everything that you need. It was a really fun make and I absolutely loved how it turned out, and it was so easy. It is literally just 2 rectangles and 4 waist ties, and it's just such a nice, perfect either beach cover up or just perfect to wear for a summer's day or lounging around the house. I used 100% linen to create mine, and I'd probably say you are best using like a cotton or linen base, unless you're confident to use more slippery fabrics, because this would be really nice in like a satin as well, I guess. But if you are a beginner, then I'd probably just stick to cotton or linen. Okay, so using the calculations from my measurements, I'm going to go for the mini version, so I'm going to go for 100 centimeters in length, and that's for each panel. So I've got my fabric folded into 2, so I'm now going to cut, and then it just completely depends on your measurements and your calculations of what your piece will need to be. But all of the instructions will be in the description. I'll link how to work out your own calculations from your measurements, and I'll also show a diagram as well. Okay, so now we have our panels. We've got our front and back, and we've got our 4 waist ties. So we're going to take one of the main panels, which is going to be our front body panel, and what we're going to do is, I'm just going to put some weights on here. What we're going to do is we're now going to create a V shape for the neckline. So to do this, what you want to do is you want to take your shoulder measurement, so from one side of your shoulder to the other. So for me that's 40 centimeters, and then you're going to divide that by 2, which is 20 centimeters. And that's going to be the size of my opening, and we're going to go 20 centimeters down for the V and 20 centimeters apart. So I'm just going to mark this out onto my fabric now. So I'm going to find the center of my panel. So I'm just going to grab some tailor's chalk and then mark that center point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a ruler. You can also use your tape measure, but I'm just going to measure across. I'm going to put the center point on 10 centimeters. And then I'm just going to mark 20 centimeters because that's going to be the side of our opening. So the 10 centimeters is going to be the center mark, what you've just drawn, and then we're going to do 10 centimeters either side. And then from that center mark, we're going to measure down 20 centimeters. And then we're just going to join up the 20 centimeter mark here that we made for the opening down to the 20 centimeter mark depth. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to get our scissors and we're going to just cut out that V, as that's going to be our neckline. Okay, so now we've cut the neckline for the front panel, we're just going to pop that aside, and then what we're going to do is we're now going to grab some more fabric and we're just going to place this on top, pop a few pins in, and we're going to use this now to create our facing, just to give the neckline a nice finish. Okay, so once you've pinned it on, we're just going to cut around the triangle shape. And then you can pop that aside, and this is the part that we're going to use. So let me just trim off the edge of this fabric because I've got too much. Okay, so then when you're left with this piece, what we're going to do is, using a ruler and some tailor's chalk, we're going to make the facing around 5 centimetres. So what we're going to do is, using this V as your guide, you're just going to measure 5 centimetres in, all the way up. And this is going to be our facing. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to get our front piece, and right side of fabric to right side of fabric, so the right side to the right side, we're going to place the facing on top. And then once that's placed on top, you can just use your scissors then to trim if you've added any excess. When adding it on, you can just now trim that to align with the top of the panel. Okay. So what we're going to do is use a 1 centimetre seam allowance for this entire project. So I'm just going to grab a pin, and then from the edge of the point here, I'm just going to measure 1 centimetre down, and I'm just going to pop a pin in, so that when I get down to here, I know that I need to sew up to this needle before I pivot and head back up this way. So 1 centimetre seam allowance, we're just going to sew in 1 centimetre from the edge, not forgetting to backstitch at the start and finish. And then as we start to approach the needle that we added earlier, we're just going to go up to this edge before we lead the needle down, lift the footer up, pivot the fabric and continue. Okay, then we're going to remove the pin, lift the foot up, leave the needle down. We're going to turn the fabric so that this edge is now aligning with the 1 centimetre. And then we're going to continue to sew. And then what we're going to do is, before we turn it round the other way, here, we're just going to cut in some little slits, but be careful not to go into the seam allowance, just around this bottom edge, just a few little cuts, just so that it eases better when we turn it around in a moment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to flip over the facing like this, And we're going to fold it over and we're going to press it now. So we're going to press the facing so that it's folded under on the neckline. So I'm just going to start by folding the seam allowance under onto this side, just pressing the seam open all the way around. Okay, so now this is what your neckline should look like. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to go and we're going to finish all of the edges with either an overlocker if you have one, or if not you can use your standard machine and use a zigzag stitch. But I'm now just going to go around the entire top here from the neckline around, ensuring to catch in the facing here. And then again, I'm going to go all the way down the side and again along the bottom. And I'm going to do that on both the front panel and on the back panel on all edges. Okay, so once you've finished all the edges of your front and back panel, we're just going to put them aside. And then now we've got our 4 straps. What we're going to do is we're just going to fold them in half lengthways, and we're going to sew with a 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way down, back stitching at the beginning and end. And then we're going to either use a safety pin or a loop turner just to pull them through, and that's going to create 4 of the waist high straps. And then once you have finished sewing along, we're going to get our scissors and we're going to trim it down towards this. We're going to trim the excess seam allowance off, just close to where we've stitched, but not too close that we catch it. That's just to reduce the bulk when we're turning it through the other way. And then we can use a loop turner or a safety pin. I'm going to use a loop turner today. Just going to pop that through. It's the same with the safety pin. You just attach it to the end of the fabric and just guide it through to the other side, pulling the fabric as you're doing it. I'll use a loop turner for this one, and then I'll use a safety pin on the next one so that you can see both in action. And then we'll just roll the fabric to get the seam sitting on the side all the way along, and we'll just give it a press with the iron just to neaten them up. So I'll move on to the next strap. This time using a safety pin, just going to pop the safety pin on the edge and then back on itself. Just pull some fabric over to begin with. It just makes it that little bit easier to start pulling it through. And that was it with the safety pin, and then we're going to do the same. We're just going to roll the seam towards the side and we're going to press it with the iron just to neaten it up. I'll just finish the rest of the straps and press them, and then we'll come back. Once you've got all of your straps pressed, what we're going to do is we're going to measure from the top of our shoulder to where our waist is. So for me, that's 38 centimetres. So on the front panel, from the top corner, I'm going to measure down 38 centimetres, and then I'm going to grab one of the straps with the seam that we've pressed facing down, and I'm just going to place it at 38 centimetres. So we're going to have raw edge to raw edge, and then I'm just going to pop a pin in to hold it in place. And then I'm going to do the same for the other side. And then I'm going to do the same for the back panel, so pop that to the side. And then the same again on the back panel. From that top corner, I'm going to measure down 38 centimetres. I'm going to grab one of the straps, place it on. Pin in, and the same again on the other side. Okay. Now we're just going to sew with a 1 centimetre seam allowance the straps in place. Don't forget to backstitch at the start and finish. So once you've attached the waist tie straps, what we're going to do is, with the wrong side of the fabric facing up, we're going to fold over right along the side edge. We're going to fold in by 1 centimetre, and then we're going to fold in again by another 1 centimetre. And we're going to press all the way down, and we're going to do that on each side for the front and each side for the back. Okay, so now once we have turned and pressed by 1 centimetre and then 1 centimetre again, we're now going to sew straight along the edge on all edges. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the strap, when you've pressed it, it'll be like this, and then you've pressed it back this way again. So the waist strap will be facing out. So when we sew along this edge, we're going to catch in the waist strap then so that it sits this way. And then once you've attached the straps and you've done both side pieces, you're then going to go ahead and hem both ends. So what I've done is I've folded it over by 2 centimetres, pressed it, folded it again by 2 centimetres, and then I've just done an edge stitch right along that line, and I've done that on both the front and back panel. And then once you've completed the hems, you're then gonna attach the front and back panel at the shoulders. So I apologise, this part hasn't been done on camera, but for some reason it had stopped recording. So I'm just gonna explain to you what I did. It's really simple. You're just gonna lay the front and back panel right sides together, and then you are gonna stitch a straight stitch straight across just to the edge of where the V-neckline starts, and you're just going to do that with your seam allowance, and then once you've finished you're just going to press the seam open, and that is your shoulder attached, and you're just going to do that on both sides. Thank you so much for watching today's Sunday Sew Club. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions then please feel free to drop them below, and like always I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It means the world to me. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend.